Fine. Last class we were discussing on the substitution rule. Hope you remember we were talking about the context-free grammar and we quickly had an glance over the ambiguous grammar, and then we went for substitution rule, which is one of the simplification of the grammar process and simplification of the grammar. And then we moved in for the null production, where we were discussing on how to find whether a variable is a null variable or not. And once you decide on the null variable, we are supposed to remove the null productions. And we were talking about a lot of examples. And the last example which we took was, you have these given this rule. This was the last example which we took. So we'll again start from the same thing. So you have what to say, you have a set of productions where we have found out that A produces null, B produces null, and C produces null. Now if a production only produces the null variable, which means if I have A produces null and I don't have any other alternative for A, such as B or A or whatever it is, then you call, wherever you find A, replace the capital A with epsilon and rewrite the production. But then if I have various alternatives, suppose you say A has, in this case, A has 3 alternatives and one among them is null. So what is the possibility of A being null? A can be generate a null production, or it can also generate some other alternatives like B or A. So we'll go in for 2 options. What if A is null and what if A is not null? Similarly, what if B is null? What if B is not null? Similarly, what if C is null? What if C is not null? Now you have various combinations. So you have different cases. What happens when A is null? What changes will I have in the set of productions? What happens when B is null? What happens when C is null? Now we'll go for different combinations. What happens when A and B are null but C doesn't produce an empty string? What happens when B and C are null whereas A doesn't produce an empty string? What happens if A and C are null whereas B doesn't produce an empty string? What happens if all the 3 produces empty string? So all these questions has to be answered. So we'll take production one by one and we'll see how it is easy to write. I think this would be much more complicated. So we'll go ahead with all these steps. We'll take the first production. First production, all these 3 need not be null also. That is the last option. Now, A, B, and C, all these 3 can be null and all these 3 need not be null. So if it is not null, you go for the original production what you have. Now you have 2 variables and these 2 are nullable variables. So now null variables. So what happens? First time we'll ensure that C becomes null. So I have A, C, A. And the second time we'll ensure that A is null. So you have ACA. And the third time we'll ensure that both A and C are null together. Fine. So you have 2 variables here. Both are null variables and therefore you give different options. The first option is when both the variables don't produce an empty string. Second one is when C produces an empty string. Third one is when A produces an empty string. And the last one is when A and C together produces an empty string. Fine. Now moving on to this case. Now A produces null. I don't have any A on the right hand side. Okay. So there are 2 options. One is if B produces null, we'll not allow this B, but we'll write only A. We'll remove all these null variable productions when you are rewriting it. Okay. So on removal, we'll eliminate all the epsilon productions. So you have only B and A option. If B is null, this will not come, only A will come. If B is not null, this also will come. So we'll have these 2. Similar explanation goes for these 2. So that is where you remove the null productions. The lengthier way is this part. Fine. And then we'll move ahead. Okay. These are our various explanations. Now you have options here. We'll take this as an example. 1 second. Fine. Let me try to. Okay. So we'll write it here itself. You have S produces AAB and A produces, S produces AAB, and A produces lambda, B produces BAA or lambda. So now what are the two variables which are null variables? A and B are null variables. We are not talking about S, because S has, if both A and B are null, even though both A and B are null, here it will generate a small a, and here it will generate two A's together. So that cannot be done. What about A? A has only option which is lambda. So wherever A is present on the right hand side of the production, A can be comfortably removed. What about B? B has two options. So you have to check when B is null and when B is not null. So since having said S produces A and B are null variables, we'll rewrite this production saying you have only one option for lambda, for A, which produces lambda. So I'll comfortably remove lambda here. Sorry, A here. You have two options. Now A produces lambda, we'll remove it because that is not part of our production once you have, once you have removed the lambda concepts. So we'll just remove this particular production. And then what about B? Production B produces either BB, or you still have this lambda here. This has been removed. A's production has been removed. So you still have lambda here. Now what we'll do, we'll go for the next phase. The next step, wherever I have B, either it can go for the first option saying BB, which is not lambda, and then it can go for the second option. So wherever I have S, like B, I'll replace it. If B doesn't produce lambda, you will have AB and AAB. If it produces lambda, you have these two options. Fine. Now what about B? B produces BB alone. Lambda has been removed. Fine. So this is the answer for the elimination of lambda production. Fine, if you have any clarifications, you can ask me, or else you can put it as proceed. Do you have any clarifications here? Okay, I'll just follow. I'll go to the next topic. Next topic is removal of useless production. Now you should know what is an useless production. Now here it says a variable is useful provided on multiple replacements it can generate a sequence of characters. Fine. So only then it can be an useful one. I'll repeat, a variable is useful provided on successive replacements or during the process of derivation, I'll be able to generate a word or a string or a sentence. Now in this case, if you see here, I'll give you various examples. Now the first example would be, we'll take, okay, now you say S produces AA or AB, and A produces AA or A. Now what happens, you start with S, for example. We'll say S derives A capital A, which then derives AA with A, and the last one is you substitute B for it, or you substitute C for it. So you say AAC, a string can be generated. But you take this particular example, the example which is given here in the picture. So if you take this, what happens is you start with S, for example. You start with S, S produces, we'll go for the first option, right? And then let me, instead of yes, let me substitute the second option. Now when I substitute the second option, it becomes A, capital A, and then a B. And then I have only one option for A. What happens? You replace A with AA. So you replace capital A with AA. Next time you have only one option. Every variable has to be replaced. So variable has only one option. So you replace A with another A and B. Now when will this finish? This goes on into an infinite loop. Every time you replace A with some other its alternative, you will have a variable still existing. So in that case, by using this production, you will never be able to generate a particular string. In that case, that particular production is a useless production. Such kind of productions has to be removed. Fine. So you also talk in terms of reachability. We'll talk about those things. So what happens in this particular example, you start with S, try to, if I replace S with AB, you have reached the answer. You have created a string, but let me choose the first alternative. If I choose the first alternative, you have A. This can be repeated with the first alternative of A again. At some point of time, if I have to terminate, I have to terminate with this C. I have a possibility of terminating. But then in this case, you cannot terminate, but because every sentential form what is generated will have a variable in it. There is no possibility that you won't have a variable. When you go for this S produces A option, you will have a variable in it, and therefore it becomes the A becomes an useless variable, and therefore the production is an useless production. Fine. So now what happens here? Such kind of productions has to be removed. Fine. So the first one is the variable is not used or is not reachable. That is also one kind of it. Now what is that type? We'll go ahead. Suppose I have one more example over here. Where is it? Yeah, one more example. I'll say I'll add in production saying B produces AB. Now, this variable B cannot be reached from the starting symbol of the grammar. If you see, B is part, from S I can reach A. From A, it is again and loop to A itself. From S or A, I'll never be able to reach B. In that case, B is an useless production. That is based on the reachability concept. So that is what is said here. Variable is not used or is not reachable. Such kind of productions has to be removed. So this production will be removed. It's an useless production. Then the next one is what I have explained so far. You have a particular variable. It goes on and on. You will never be able to create a sentence, and therefore the production becomes useless. Fine. So we'll take an example here. So you have this particular one second. We'll just not delete it. Okay, we are just talking about useless production. Even though you have a lambda production, we are not bothered about it. We are only talking about the useless productions. So now what happens? If you see here, A produces BA, it moves on. Suppose you say S produces AS, you can have a lambda, you can end there. But then if S produces AB is given, or S produces AS and then S is being replaced by AB, whatever it is, you have this AB option. Now, what about A? A goes on and on and on. It never ends. And therefore, A becomes an useless production because I will not be able to generate an sequence of characters or a sentence. When this becomes useless, what about B? B also produces AA. It is based on the variable or production which you have deleted. So that also becomes useless. Once these two are useless, if you see here, I have deleted production A, I have deleted production B. So if I have an alternative with A and B on the right hand side of any other production, those productions should also be deleted. Fine. So what remains? Sorry. What remains is this particular one. The S produces AS or lambda. Fine. So I'll repeat. BA is being deleted or removed because BA on any number of iterations, it will generate a variable in its sentential form. Now, what about B produces AA? That also is removed because this will produce only AA, which can also be deleted. So that is how useless productions are deleted. If you have any clarifications, you can ask me. Do you have any clarifications on useless production? Can I proceed further? Can I have an yes or no onto the chat box, please? Okay, what about the others? Okay, ma'am. So we'll move further. We'll go ahead with unit production. Now, what is unit production? A variable has to produce another variable. That becomes an unit production. Fine. So we'll go ahead. What is unit production? A variable has to produce another variable. Now, you here again you have one variable, but then this is not an unit production. The alternative should have only one character, and that should be a variable. So that is what is being defined here. Your unit production is a rule whose right-hand side consists of a single non-terminal. You should not have two terminals and one non-terminal. You should have only one non-terminal on the right-hand side. Such kind of unit productions has to be removed based on certain substitution. Fine. So for in this case, what happens is all these are not unit production, but then A produces A, B alone is unit production. B produces C is unit production. So now you have to have an dependency graph. Dependency graph which denotes the unit production. So what is the dependency graph which denotes unit production? If we take the same thing is given here. You say S produces, S is not dependent on B, A or B or C, whereas A, B and C are dependent. A to B, you have an unit production. B to C also you have an unit production. Fine. So dependency graph gives us two information. The first dependency graph, what helps us is to identify whether you can connect one variable with the other. If you see here, from S, you'll be able to reach A. Normal dependency graph which connects one variable and the other. Okay. From S, you will also be in a position to reach C. So you have connectivity to C. What about A? A has connectivity to B. B has connectivity to C. Fine. And C has connectivity to C itself. So this is the overall graph of dependency graph of the grammar. From S, I'll be able to connect A and C. So I am connecting A and C. From A, I'll be able to connect B. So you have an edge which connects A to B. From B, you'll be able to connect C. From C, we'll be able to connect C. But then, now the next step is to identify the edges which gives you only the dependency graph. So unit production. Now the next one second. This is your dependency graph. We'll go ahead with the dependency graph of your unit production alone. So if I have to have the dependency graph for the unit production, I have to only mark the dependency of these two productions. Fine. So your every variable is denoted as an edge here. A is dependent, you has an unit production which produces B. B is another variable which has an unit production which produces C. So this is the dependency graph which represents the unit production. The previous one is the dependency graph which produced the which produces the full or which shows the relationship of all the variables in the production. Now the next step is to remove this unit production. Fine. So we'll go step by step. We'll go step by step. We are supposed to use an substitution rule. Okay. We are supposed to use an substitution rule before we go ahead deleting all the unit productions. So what we'll do is one second. Okay, so what we had, we'll do certain substitutions here, right? We have the same set, and let me do the substitution one after the other. Now you have C produces CC and B produces C. So whenever I have an unit production, this alternative has to be replaced with the right hand side of C's production. So what I'll do, instead of C, fine, let me replace the C with these options. Now what happens, it is CC or C, two C's are occurring. So I'll eliminate the duplicate. So it is CC or C. Now what happens, you have one more unit production. So we'll instead of B, B's production has to be replaced. So here I'll replace B's production. Right? So your answer would be A produces CC or C or A, and B produces CC or C, and C produces CC or C. So now what have we done? We have replaced the unit production, and we have first we have identified the unit production, and then we have replaced the unit production with its alternatives. Now if we just look at it, B doesn't occur on the right hand side of any alternative in any production, and therefore B becomes an useless variable. Fine. So all, when you simplify it, one or more transformations has to take place. Fine. So whatever we have done is we have removed unit production. So 4 transformations we have learned so far. The first one is the null substitution rule. Second one is the null production. Third one is the useless production, and the last one is the unit production. Fine. Now what are we supposed to do? We have to apply all these 3 before you move on with the normal forms. So before I move on, start with the normal form, we'll just go ahead, take a break and get the enter the attendance. Once the attendance is done, then we'll go ahead with the normal forms. Fine. 1 second. You can give your attendance, ma. I have received only 58 responses. Is there anyone who is yet to give the attendance? I am closing the responses. Okay, is there anyone who is yet to give the attendance? 1 minute, ma'am. I have already closed it. You can send it to my mail ID, WhatsApp number, ma'am. Okay, I will go for the next process again. Okay, Job, you can send it to my WhatsApp number. Okay, so now you have to do all these three onto a given production. So we'll first write the production. You have S produces A capital A or A B B, and A produces A or lambda. And then B produces BB or BBC, and C produces B. We'll do it one by one. The first one, we'll go ahead with step 1, where we will try to identify the unit production first. We'll go ahead with unit production. So we'll try to remove the unit production. Which one is the unit production? In the previous case, the C produces B is the unit production. Fine. C produces B alone is the unit production. So what should we do? In the place of B, I am supposed to replace with the right hand side of B's production. And therefore, the first three productions remains untouched. We are not going to do any changes there. The first three productions remains untouched. We are not going to do any changes there. Right? But then what about the last one? The last one will say C produces BB or BBC. Fine. So step 1, you have removed the unit production. You have identified the unit production saying C produces B, and then you have removed the unit production by substituting B's alternative or B's right hand side in the place of B. Now the next step is to remove the useless production. We'll take this particular step. We'll remove the useless production in the second step. Second step, we'll remove the useless production. Now tell me which one is an useless variable. Which one is an useless variable? You can put it onto the chat box. Which one among these four which one or two among these four are the useless variable? Let it be S, A, B or C. Can I have it on the chat box, please? Which one among the four variables act as the useless variable? B, okay. Can I have any C? Okay, fine. Okay. Is there any other answers? You have two options. One is B and the other one is C. Do you have any other options? A and C, okay. Can I have the response from more number of students, please? A, B, and C are three options given by your friends. Is there anyone who says only B or only C or only A or both A, B, and C or A, B, and C? Can I have it on the chat box, please? Which means only these three students have understood. Am I right? Can I have the response, please? Okay, I'll give the attendance to all those who have talked. responded to whatever I got it in spite of getting the attendance in Google form. That would be fine for me. Okay. So now you have two options. The first option is you have to check for the reachability, right? From S, you are able to reach A and B, and from B, I can reach C. So reachability, you don't have any issues. But what about generating a sequence of characters? Or when will in what case can I generate a sequence of character? If I take B, B will not be in the case I take A at any point of time I can replace this variable by the second alternative lambda and I can end the process. But then what about B? B, you substitute BB or you substitute BBC. In that case, it goes on and on and on. You will never be able to generate a sentence. The same thing goes to C, and therefore B and C are useless productions. Since B and C are being deleted, now the question is what to do with the second alternative of S. This also uses the variable B, which is already deleted, and therefore this production is also being useless. So whatever remains is S produces AA and A produces AA or lambda. So after this, what am I supposed to do? We are supposed to eliminate the null production. So step 3 is you eliminate the null production. Now, which one is a null variable? Among these two variables, which one is a null variable? Those who have answered the questions, you can answer it. Which one is a null variable? Can I have the answers on the chat box, please? Which one? Do you have a null variable? If so, which one is a null variable? Students, you know that you're really getting on my nerves. Can someone respond?
Ma'am, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So now you have the null production as a null variable as A. So A, now if you look at A's production has two alternatives. Either it can go with A or it can go ahead with lambda. So what if A produces, we'll rewrite it, okay? What if A produces lambda? In that case, the first production, this one becomes, this one becomes A alone. What if A doesn't produce lambda? It produces some other, the next option. Then it becomes AA. Similarly with A, you are going to eliminate only the lambda string. What if it doesn't produce lambda? It goes ahead with the first option. What if it produces lambda? In that case, this A will be always eliminated because it is AA lambda, which is AA. So your answer would be these two after 3 productions. So if you just go ahead and look at it, we'll go step by step. We have taken the first set of grammar, the first set of productions, identified the useless unit production, tried to remove it, we had an answer to it. Now take the answer of which you have removed and then go ahead with identifying the useless production, remove it. And then whatever you have obtained by removing the useless production, try to identify the null production and remove it. Fine. So these three options are mandatory. When you do all these, when you try to do removing either an null production or an unit production or an useless production, whatever you do behind the screen is you do a lot of substitution. And that is why we learned substitution first, then followed by unit production, useless production, and null production. Among these three, unit, useless, and null production, which order should you follow? There is no order. You can, if in the question they have asked only null production removal, go ahead with null production alone. Only useless production, go ahead with useless production alone. But then if you are asked to convert it into a normal form, you are supposed to apply all these three. And in which order should I apply? I can apply it in any order. Fine. So we'll go ahead with the next topic, the normal. Yes, ma.
After removing null production, can we write AA after A?
Where? This one. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. For yes.
Yes, you can write
A after A.
After A. Yeah, you can write it. Why?
Just asking, ma'am.
You can write it in any order. You can write it AA or A, or you can write it AA, or whatever order it is. Order doesn't matter here.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead with normal forms. There are two normal forms which you have to work on. Easiest way of understanding is the normal form will have on the left hand side, it will have one variable that is common. Okay, that is common for CFG. Now this context-free grammar, whatever we taken, can be called as Chomsky's normal form, provided on the right hand side of the variable, it should have two variables or one terminal. Okay, so it should have two variables or it should have one terminal. 3 terminals, 4 terminals are not allowed. Combination of terminals and variables are not allowed. Even one variable is not allowed. So either it should have one terminal or it should have two variables on the right hand side. In that case, you call it as in Chomsky's normal form. And the next one is Greibach normal form, which you normally call it as GNF. There the production should be of the form X produces A beta, where A is the terminal and beta can be variable closure. So which means X produces A is allowed, X produces A, B is allowed. After A, the first character has to be a terminal, followed by any number of variables which is allowed in a Greibach normal form. Whereas in your Chomsky's normal form, you go ahead with X produces A or X produces BC, which has two variables. Now, having done this, okay, 1 second. We'll take the same example as what we have taken before. Fine. So this is the answer of removing the unit production, useless production, and the null production. Fine. So now what has really happened is you have gone in for while you are asked to convert it into a normal form, the first thing what you have to do is remove unit production, useless production, and null production, and then you convert it into normal form. So what we'll do is we'll try to convert this into Chomsky's normal form. Now Chomsky's normal form, we usually call it as ENF. Now what has to happen? It has to either have a variable on the right hand side, or it should have a terminal on the right hand side, or it should have two variables. Right? So what we'll do is we'll do a little bit of changes here. The first one, has one variable terminal and one variable which is not allowed. So what I'll do is I'll introduce a new variable VA. Fine, I'll introduce a new variable VA. Now, this any conversion you can use. You can use B, C, D, P, Q, or whatever it is. I am just using it as VA just to indicate it is a variable which produces VA. Fine. And then the A we'll have it as such. Okay, we'll not do any changes here. We'll keep the A as such. and then RA, because this follows the Chomsky's normal form. Now, what about this case? This case, we'll do a little bit of changes here. It is A produces, instead of these two, I can have it as 2VA, right? So I'll have it as wherever I find A, I'll replace it by VA if it doesn't follow the Chomsky's normal form. So you will have VAA, VA, VA. Here also you'll have VA, VA. Now if you just look at it, or the first one doesn't follow the Chomsky's normal form because it has 3 variables. The second one follows the Chomsky's normal form. So what I'll do is, let me try to take these off and combine, make it as V1. Fine. So now I have 2 new variables which I have to define. So let me define VA. Now VA produces A. Now what about V1? V1 was replaced in the place of 2 VAs. So V1 produces, we'll take it as VA, VA. Fine. So now what has happened? Can I replace VA, VA by V1? No, I cannot replace. If I replace it, it becomes a variable which produces another variable which is not in your Chomsky's norm format. And therefore, this cannot be done. Fine. So how do I write it? Wherever you find it violates the Chomsky's normal form, instead of a terminal, add a new variable. And if there are more variables, try to combine the variables so that and introduce a new variable into it. So fine. So what happens? This I have comfortably inserted a new variable. Whenever there is a new variable, ensure that you write a new production. So VA produces A, and then V1 produces, here you had VA, VA and A, which is not possible, and therefore we converted it into VA, VA and A, and then converted VA, VA to V1. Fine, we'll go ahead with the Greibach normal form. We'll go ahead with Greibach's normal form. Now what happens? Your terminal followed by any number of variable is allowed. So this follows your GNF form. I'm not going to change it. The first production follows the GNF form, which I'm not going to change it. What about the next one? Next one, the first character has to be a terminal followed by any number of variables, and therefore I have to substitute the first A, I'm keeping it as such. Second A, I'm replacing it by VA. Even in the second alternative, the first A is kept as such. The second one is replaced by VA. So I have only one new variable and I have only one new production to be added. So you have your Chomsky's normal form and your Greibach's normal form. Fine, we'll stop here. If you have any clarifications, you can ask me. Else you can leave the meet. Thank you. Next class, I want everyone